Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad to see such a wonderful crowd for our special chamber luncheon today with United States Senator Rand Paul. It's a great way to start our Monday, great way to start our week. First of all, I'd like to ask our friend William Hunt to please come forward and bless today's luncheon.
Bobby always does this to me. That mic's too tall. Well, welcome today. I hope you're having a great day and we'll have a good afternoon. Will you please join me in a word of prayer today? Dear Lord, thank you for this day and thank you for everything you've given to us. Thank you for your Son, Jesus Christ, and the sacrifice that he made for each one of us that's here today. Lord, thank you for the grace that you give to me each and every day, and please help us to remember to give that same grace that you give to us to others. Thank you for this chamber and our ambassadors within this chamber. They give so much to this community, and we're very appreciative of what they do. Dear Lord, I pray today that you're with our local leaders, state leaders, and federal leaders. I pray that you give them the discernment that they need to help lead our communities and be vessels to your name. Dear Lord, please go with us as we leave here today. I pray that you give us safe travels. Bless this food to the nourishment of our body. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, William. Well, good afternoon and welcome. On behalf of the Somerset-Pulaski County Chamber of Commerce, it is my pleasure to welcome you to what is truly a very special chamber luncheon. We're absolutely thrilled to have United States Senator Rand Paul with us here today in Pulaski County. Senator, thank you for taking the time to be with us and for making Somerset a stop on your schedule. We're honored to have you here, and I know our members and guests are looking forward to hearing directly from you about the issues that matter to Kentucky, to our nation, and especially to the people and businesses we represent right here in Pulaski County. The mission of the Chamber is simple: to promote, protect, and strengthen our business community and to help create an environment where business can grow and succeed. Events like today's luncheon are an important part of that mission. We believe that a strong business community needs to be an informed, engaged, and connected business community. That's why we work so hard to bring business leaders, elected officials, and community leaders together. Before we get started, I wanted to recognize some of the people who make the work of this chamber possible every single day. First, I'd like to sincerely thank our Chamber Board of Directors for their continued guidance, leadership, and direction. Their commitment and support are invaluable to the success of our Chamber and our business community. If we could, let's give a big round of applause to our incredible Chamber ambassadors who have been here this morning helping with registration, check-in, and making sure everything runs smoothly as our guests arrived. We could not do this event without you. Thank you very much. I always ask them, I said, how do you make a 4-person chamber look like a 10-person chamber? Have good ambassadors. I also want to recognize a few very important partners who have helped make today's luncheon possible. A special thank you to Coca-Cola and Pepsi for providing the drinks for today's event, and thank you to Sassy Spoon Catering for providing today's wonderful meal. We greatly appreciate you helping us make today's luncheon special. I also want to express our sincere appreciation to Lonnie Lawson and the Center for Rural Development for allowing us to use this beautiful facility. The center has been an incredible partner to the Chamber over the years, and we're extremely fortunate to have a facility like this right here in our community. Lonnie, thank you for always being such a great friend and supporter to the Chamber. Absolutely. Now I want to take a moment to recognize the businesses and organizations that have made a tremendous investment in today's event. TC Energy, AT&T, Forcht Bank, Forcht Media, the Kentucky Broadcasters Association, and the Pulaski County Lincoln Club. Let's give our sponsors a tremendous round of applause. These organizations didn't simply put their names on a sponsorship. They made an investment in bringing our business community together and creating opportunities like today's luncheon. We're incredibly grateful for their partnership, their generosity, and their continued commitment to Somerset and Pulaski County. Please join me one more time in thanking all of our sponsors for their generosity today. And now we have the opportunity to hear from a man who brings a unique perspective to the issues facing our Commonwealth and our country. We're honored to have United States Senator Rand Paul with us today. So without further delay, I'd like to ask Alex Wilson, Chief Operating Officer of RidgeNet Public Safety Solutions, to please come forward and introduce today's speaker. Alex, the podium is yours. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here, and let's have a great luncheon.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And I just want to say again, thank you, Bobby, Crystal, and the entire team of the Somerset-Pulaski County Chamber of Commerce for all that you all do. Yeah, as a business leader here in the community, we couldn't have done it without everything that you all have done for us over the years and continue to do. So I really think that Somerset-Pulaski County is truly a unique place to have that opportunity in business. Well, today it's my privilege to introduce our United States Senator, Dr. Rand Paul, and welcome him to the Somerset-Pulaski County area. Senator Paul has represented the Commonwealth of Kentucky for since 2011 and has been one of the nation's leading advocates for individual liberty, fiscal responsibility, and limited constitutional government. He currently serves as chairman of the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs, where he works to provide oversight of the federal government and hold it accountable to the American people. Before his election to the United States Senate, Dr. Paul spent 17 years practicing ophthalmology there in Bowling Green, where he's from. He founded the Southern Kentucky Lions Eye Care Clinic to provide eye care to Kentuckians in need, and has continued to use his medical skills to perform charitable eye surgeries here in the Commonwealth and overseas with his mission work. Throughout his career in medicine and public service, Senator Paul has remained committed to serving the people of Kentucky and advocating for the principles he believes will strengthen our Commonwealth and our country. So we're very pleased to have him here today, and please join me in welcoming Dr. Rand Paul to the stage.
Thank you. It is great to be home, where people have a lick of sense and a little bit of understanding about balancing budgets. I often say everybody balances their budget except for the federal government. Your local county balances their budget, your local city balances their budget, the state balances their budget. The federal government, not so much. This year my mom turned 90, and her 90th birthday coincides, with 250 years of our republic. And it's strange to think that she's been alive for more than a third of the history of our republic. So our republic really isn't that old. But when she was a kid, it also spanned many generations of improvement. They didn't even have a television. They had a radio when she was a kid. But one of their forms of entertainment was poetry, and they would recite poetry as they were driving down the road in their car. And it wasn't like you had the kids, zombied out now on their phones, either talking with each other or, looking at an app or playing a video game. They were interacting with others in the car. I know that's hard to understand. It's like a foreign concept. But she could recite at one point, I think it was 600 lines of Hiawatha, Longfellow's Hiawatha. But another one that they would recite was the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. And I came across it recently because, do you know who sent him on the ride? Okay, you probably don't. But the guy who sent him on the ride was a guy named Dr. Joseph Warren, who Warren County is named after. He was a 34-year-old physician who was killed at Bunker Hill. But he was actually much more famous than Paul Revere at the time, and much more at the hierarchy of all the patriots, fomenting the revolution. But I decided I would memorize a few lines of this. And so, you probably, some of you who are old enough, remember this when you were a child. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. It was the 18th of April, 75. Hardly a man is still alive who remembers that famous day and year. He said to a friend, if the British march by land or sea on the town tonight, hang a lantern aloft from the belfry arch of the North Tower Church as a signal light, one if by land, two if by sea, and I on the opposite shore shall be. So my mom is getting up there, and my brother played this for her, and she has some trouble with her memory, but as I'm reciting the 8 lines of the poem that took me a long time, frankly, to memorize, too long, and she starts reciting it, from memory, and as I finish, she's reciting the next stanza. So it's funny how the memory is wired, that people have old memories they retain for a very long time, particularly things that rhymed and that they put into their memory. But Joseph Warren was a patriot. Warren County was named after him. He wrote something called the Suffolk Resolves, and the Suffolk Resolves were important. It was a big deal in Boston, and they were about declaring independence, about their unhappiness with the king, and he sent them to the Continental Congress, which was in Philadelphia, and you know who he sent? Paul Revere. About a year later is when he sent Paul Revere to warn the people that the British were on the march. So these parts of our history, I think, are still incredibly important. It's incredibly important to remember what the country was founded upon. Some people are confused about this. They think that, oh yeah, you have these rights, the Bill of Rights, that the government gave you these rights. But that's the opposite of the truth. In fact, some people were worried about writing them down because they said they don't come from the government. They come from your creator. They're naturally yours. They're your natural rights. And it's an important distinction, because if the government can create rights, the government can take them away. They felt that the rights embodied in the Bill of Rights were something so important, but they wanted to make sure that it wasn't a complete listing. So the only way they could get the Bill of Rights attached to the Constitution is they had to put the 9th and 10th Amendment in there. And the 9th Amendment says that the rights listed are not to disparage any rights not listed. And then the 10th Amendment is very clear, and probably the most important part of the Bill of Rights, frankly, is it said those rights and powers not granted to the federal government are left to the states and people. And it was a big deal. That was a big restriction on the federal government. If we weren't explicitly told we can do it, we're not supposed to do it. And though for a generation, though, what's been happening is when it's vague and the court says, well, I'm not sure if the government really has a right to be doing this, it looks sort of like a tie. Oh, well, tie goes to the government. The fancy name for this was Chevron deference. Went on for a decade or two. Every time there was a vague law and they said, well, we're not sure, oh, well, tie goes to the government. So government grew bigger and bigger and more ominous. The regulation of your daily business or of your pond or some ditch next to your land became a big federal to-do. They got more and more involved until just recently. And one of the things about the courts becoming more conservative that I think has been probably as important or more important than almost anything we've done in Washington is jettisoning this idea of Chevron deference. Now tie goes to the people. It's the way it should have been. Tie goes to the individual. If they come to your property and some goose has landed that used to land has landed a month ago on the Great Lakes and now they're on your property, that is not a nexus to the international waters of the U.S. Some transient pond or stream on your water has nothing to do with the government being involved. The fact that some bird who flew from the Great Lakes down here and touched your pond doesn't mean the federal government can regulate your pond. But it was going the other way for a long, long time. So I think we should be very happy about that. In addition to this being the 250th anniversary of our republic, it's also the 250th anniversary of Adam Smith. I think that's important to remember because we have these people, fortunately most of them are not in Kentucky, maybe other places like New York City, but who believe that capitalism is a problem and socialism is the answer. But Adam Smith wrote about capitalism. He wrote The Wealth of Nations. He wrote about where wealth comes from. Frankly, one of the things that drives wealth and drives the efficiency of the marketplace is the invisible hand. What is the invisible hand? Some people scoff at it. The invisible hand is self-interest, that you provide for you and your family first before you think of other people. And that may sound greedy, but that self-interest in trying to provide for the first person first before you extend charity to others drives the efficiency of it. And the invisible hand is there throughout, because if you don't obey the incentives of the marketplace, your competitor may, and you have to compete with those in the same marketplace in order to provide things efficiently. But that's the beauty of where our wealth came from. It came from the idea and the knowledge that your rights come from your Creator. The government doesn't give them to you. They're naturally yours. But then amongst that, acknowledging that you have those rights, that you have the rights to the fruit of your labor, that is what created all of this. You know, there's that guy, you remember, he says, "Make America," yeah, you've heard it, "Make America Great Again," yeah. In order to do that, we have to understand what made America great in the first place. What made us great was this idea that our rights came from our Creator, but also this idea that capitalism, that free markets work, that incentives work, that when you have a self-incentive to try to maximize your profit, you're also trying to minimize your cost because you're competing with others, leads to this amazing marketplace that is America, full of so much wealth that people are dying to get here. I mean, there's no place in the world people would rather be than here. And I'm all for saying that we can bring some people here legally, but you know what? They need to be coming here for a job. They need to come here sponsored by somebody else. And I think they shouldn't be coming here for any welfare. No welfare at all. I would eliminate it all. We do have a movement, though, in our country going the opposite direction. My wife and I wrote a book a few years ago called The Case Against Socialism. And people are like, well, hasn't that case already been made? Haven't we already won the intellectual battle against socialism? Well, you would think so. And I think actually intellectually we have won that. But when you do polls now among young people, half the young people are like, well, we ought to try socialism. And I'm not sure exactly where it creeps up from, but we've raised a generation of people who believe that, well, everybody should get a trophy. And I know Johnny can't spell very well, and Susie can spell better, and she wins the spelling bee every. But wouldn't it be fair just to give Johnny a trophy also? And then when I remember when I first moved here, my wife was from Russellville, came here in 1993. They got rid of the spelling bee, and I was like, why? You know, we can't reward talent. We can't reward people who work harder than others. But it's a little bit about what socialism is like. Capitalism, you have equal justice under the law. Socialism, they want to have an equal outcome. So no matter how hard you work or don't work, everybody's supposed to get the same. Someone has 3 cars, the government's supposed to go take 1 car and give it to somebody who doesn't have a car. But it leads to a rotten society, a rotten economy, and it doesn't create any wealth. I mean, if people love socialism, they ought to go. We should give them a one-way ticket down to Venezuela. The average person in Venezuela lost 30 pounds last year. They have more oil and more wealth than Saudi Arabia, but their system is corrupted. Their system is corrupted because a bunch of people vote to take all the money, and then they vote to disperse it. And you say, well, yeah, that way we don't have these rich people. Well, you know they still do. They have a 1%. It's the brother of the general, the brother of the dictator, the cousin of the dictator. Everything is based on who you're related to, not what you do. And it's one of the beauties of our country that came with this and should be remembered with this 250th anniversary. This was the first country that came about where you were free to practice your religion, but also who you became was less dependent on who your parents were and more dependent on how hard you worked. We still are that to a degree. Nothing's perfect, but the one great thing about this country is we are a meritocracy. People rise up from nothing, and you probably know them in your community who started with nothing and became very, very successful because they worked hard. That is part of the invisible hand. It's part of what drives us forward. I, for one, think that that's incredibly important, that we know our history. I think it's important that when we send people off to represent us, that they understand that's part of their job. Some people think it's to pass legislation. No, I think the primary job of your legislature is to defend your liberty. And I need to make sure that the legislation they're passing is not taking your liberty before I think about whether we should pass that legislation. We face daunting tasks ahead of us. We borrowed $436 billion last month. In 1 month. We last year expanded the debt ceiling $5 trillion in one bill. We've never ever done that before. So some people say I should go along to get along more. There's plenty of people doing that. I think there needs to be somebody saying, there needs to be a canary in the mine saying, oh my goodness, what have they done to our money? People say, oh, we have, the biggest problem is affordability. If we only knew what that was, and if we only knew how to fix it. Well, we know what affordability is. It's inflation. Prices go up because the value of your dollar is going down. We know what causes it. When we run a $2 trillion deficit in a year, the Federal Reserve prints up money to buy the debt, and when they do, new money enters into the circulation, and your prices go up. Sometimes it works. It can work if your wages go up faster than your prices, but what happens when your prices go up faster than your wages? That's the affordability problem. Inflation isn't based on, oh, it was 10% 4 years ago and that 10% went away. No, it never came back. So if you want to know the effects of the working class in our country, the last 5 years we've had 25% inflation. So if you are working class and your wages haven't gone up 25% in the last 5 years, you are making less money. And this isn't a small group of people, it's an expanding group of people. Many of the people here run the businesses and own the businesses. Just be aware, and we need to be aware politically, that there are a lot of people that aren't doing as well as they were 5 years ago. What can we do about it? Quit running the debt. End the war in Iran as soon as possible, and start understanding once again that international trade is beneficial to large groups of our people. Farmers trade overseas. We've got UPS in our state. We've got Toyota, General Motors, and Ford. The parts go back and forth between Mexico and Canada. We can't vilify trade and say, oh, trade is terrible. Trade is just part of the marketplace. We are richer because we don't have to make our own clothes. That was one of the great insights of Adam Smith, other than the invisible hand, was the insight that the division of labor makes you richer. If you've got to make your clothes, make your pants, make your socks, make your shoes, you don't have much time to do other things. Once we are freed from doing those things, even though we have nostalgia for when there was a shoemaker in Somerset, the nostalgia is misplaced. We are richer, even though it's been outsourced. And as trade grows, we have all grown. People say, well, the middle class is shrinking and trade is killing us. It's not true. If you measure the middle class, the core middle class being 60,000 to 120, and you say the upper middle class is 120 to 400, which we might call rich, but in this purpose we're going to say is upper middle class, the upper middle class from 120 to 400 has tripled in the last 40 years. The middle class, the core middle class, 60 to 120, got slightly smaller, but they didn't go to the lower class, they went to the upper middle class. It's a great system, and it is working in general terms, other than a few problems we have with misspending by Washington politicians. But the system itself is fundamentally good. I think if we understand that it's based upon a bedrock foundation, that our rights come from our Creator, I think there is nothing that can stop us. I vote that we keep trying to fight for those natural rights, for what is naturally ours from our Creator, and I continue and will continue that fight. Thank you very much. You want to do? I think we have time if we want to do a few questions, as long as they're easy questions. Yes, just speak loudly.
That's helpful. My name is John Secker. I'm the general manager at Bosch Berries. I've been in agriculture for 40 years. We've worked a lot with the H-2A program, but it's outdated. We're competing with Canada, who have 12-month and 3-year programs. What or when is Congress going to deal with getting us a better program for the H-2As?
Yeah, I'm all for the program. I have a bill to update the H-2A program that would allow you, if you had 15 workers last year and you filled out all the paperwork, it's push a button and they can come back the next year. So our program doesn't necessarily change it fundamentally, but makes it much easier to get back the same set of workers. I think we need to acknowledge, and really this should be the trade-off. Some people say, well, what are we going to do with all these people breaking into the country? I say, well, for the ones who work, if they want to get a work permit, the trade-off would be you get a work permit, but you don't get to vote. Not ever. You just don't get a pathway to vote. You get a pathway to being a worker. But I think the work programs have value, and I think if we, I haven't liked seeing the animosity towards people working here because, frankly, a lot of the workers are necessary for agriculture. So I'm for the programs. I'm for making it better. My bill has languished because there are so many emotions on the other side of the aisle. They want voters. On our side of the aisle, those who are open want workers. But they only want voters. They don't really care if they're working or not. And they don't care if they're on welfare or not. But I'm for the worker part, just not the welfare part. And so I think there is something can be done on this. Mine is a very technical bill. It's not it doesn't, change fundamentally the H-2A program, but it just makes it easier to work. We had a farmer in Lexington a couple years ago, had 17 workers. He wanted back the same 17 again the next year, and paperwork caught him up and they denied them, and he lost a whole season because he couldn't replace them with American workers because there were no American workers to be found. So I think there are things we can do with the program to make it better. Yes. Wait for the microphone if you can, because I think here we go. Okay.
Hello, Senator. My name is Mac Reporter. I'm the post commander over here at VFW 269. I'm also the state student veterans chairman. My question to you is about the Take Care of America's Veterans Act. Your staffers are probably tired of me. I call your office every other day. But I was wondering, we agree with a lot of what's in the bill package, especially the Major Richard Starr Act. Very much deserved. We're all for it. But is there a way that we can restructure the bill to remove Section 108 so that we are not paying for the guys that are in Iran right now, that we're not paying for they're paying for our disability? It really doesn't make sense that you have veterans paying for veterans when you could be honoring the contract. We raised our right hand, we signed that dotted line, blank check up to payable to our life, and the government is supposed to honor that contract, and this bill package doesn't do that.
Yeah, I'm very open to hearing from you, and I hope my staff has been as well. The Section 108, I can't tell you specifically what that is right now. But what I would say is, as far as the big picture of things, yes, we should take care of our veterans. Yes, our veterans have given a lot. And what we need to look for are practical ways to do it, not just to add it to the debt, but to say this versus this. And so I had this discussion not too long ago with someone from the opposing party, and I said, well, if this is a good idea to do, why don't we not do X? And I think it was actually on this bill where I introduced an amendment that said that refugees from this country who come into this country shouldn't get welfare. It's already the law that if you come here legally, you're not supposed to get welfare for 5 years. But the refugees have an end to run around this, and they say, well, they come from poor countries. And I said, if you want to take care of them, they can come in if you take care of them, but the government shouldn't do it. If the different church charities are bringing them in, the church should take care of them. They shouldn't just dump them onto the federal rolls for that. And then I would say, well, that's a pay for. That's something we would quit spending money. We've sent $200 billion to Ukraine. You know we pay for the pensions of Ukraine workers, of government workers? They haven't had an election over there in 5 or 6 years now. So if you ask me whether the veterans' benefits should be paid for or the pensions of the Ukrainian government workers should be paid for, I'm with you. But what I want to make them do is that it should be a trade-off. So I'm for doing it, but I want to take the money from some other place and provide it to people that are more worthy of that. Just a second. I think we're going to go here, and then when you get the microphone.
Yes, sir. I'm Chuck Johnston, a retired military and educator. My question is just, what's the status on Fauci?
He took the fifth 111 times. The only person to take the fifth more than that is Carlos Marcelo of the Marcelo crime family. I think it was inappropriate. I think he could have he's got a pardon. He could have just said, these are the reasons I did this, these are the reasons I did that. But he's been unwilling to take responsibility. He promoted and gave the funding to the Wuhan lab. That, in all likelihood, led to the pandemic. We've been able to look at the structure of the virus. We've been able to look at a lot of different scientific evidence of this. The FBI, the CIA, and the Department of Energy scientists have all concluded that it came from the lab. But he's still been unwilling to even apologize or say that he made a mistake in funding this research. It goes back even farther. 10 years before the pandemic, in 2010, in the Netherlands, they took the bird flu, the avian flu, and they mutated it to make it more transmissible among animals and through the air. I think that's a death wish. The avian flu is a 50% mortality. I think it'd be a terrible idea. Who funded it? Anthony Fauci. So it is important that we have this debate, not just for him and what happens to him. It's important that we decide among us that we're not going to fund this dangerous research anymore. So that's why I keep pushing this, because 15 million people died. Probably people in here had a loved one die. Almost every bit of his advice he would contradict in private and say the opposite. The most recent one we have is him saying, oh yeah, the booster may cause miscarriages because you get a fever and this cytokine storm. To the public, he was saying everybody should just turn your brain off and take the vaccine. And I'm not against the vaccine. My age and up, I probably would have. The only reason I didn't is because I had the disease in March of 2020. But the thing is we should not turn our brain off, say, oh, you got to be vaccinated. I had the disease. But had I not, I probably would have been vaccinated. But it was never appropriate for your 15-year-old, still is not. The risks of this vaccine are for young, healthy people. The risks are greater than the benefits of the vaccine. Young people weren't dying. We knew it in the beginning of this pandemic, and he wasn't honest with us. We've sent him to the Department of Justice. It's called contempt of Congress. It would be a new crime. He could be held in contempt and sent back to us and told to testify would be one option. He could be held in prison until he's testified, or nothing could happen. Those are the three possibilities. I'm not sure what will happen. Oh, yours have been answered. Okay, go ahead.
Senator, my name is Johnny Lunsford. I'm also retired military and have a career here in Somerset now. And I appreciate the works you cited by Adam Smith. I've always tried to be a student of those works and those by Milton Friedman, Thomas Sowell, yourself and your father and others. But one thing that's come to light recently is the sell-off or restructuring of rights of public lands, public hunting grounds, national parks, etc. As an outdoorsman, I am unsure of the truth of the matter of what's trying to go on here and what actually is fiscally responsible for the government to do with this. So I was hoping you could shed some light on that.
The devil's sort of in the details, so I can't give you all the details, but I can give you some examples. We have things called monuments, and it'll be like, that Devil's Plateau I think that's in Wyoming. So once upon a time, there was probably 900,000 acres attached to it. Now when President Obama came forward, he made them all bigger. He assigned another 1 million acres to it. So there's a question whether or not we need 2 million acres to be taken off. There are minerals out there too. And so I think you can have a good environment and still mine some of the minerals, and you have to go through the trade-off. And I'm not for eliminating any of the monuments. I don't think anybody is. But there is a question of size and how much. I'll give you an example that came up last week. I was up near Taylorsville, and there's a Taylorsville Lake. They took the land through eminent domain, the federal government did, and made a lake. And they say it's for flood purposes. I'm not against that. I would continue that. But it's a beautiful lake now. The local community would like to build out there. I'm going to introduce legislation to give the land back to them. I don't know if I'll succeed or not, But I see no reason to, look, Barren River, we build houses around it. It's a beautiful place, becomes part of the tax basis for the community. That community could use it. But really, I'd just like to give back to the community. If they want, there's a state park there too. If they want to give some of the land to the state park, they could do that. They could give it all to the state park. That's not I don't think my decision to make, but I'd like to send it back local to let the local people make the decision on this. And I think what would happen is you'd have a reasonable balance. I doubt most people, given the choice of, like Lake Cumberland, are you guys going to vote to drain it? No, we now see it as a benefit. The tourism and the marinas and all that is a benefit now. But if there's land like next to some land and the Corps still has it, I'm for letting the local people decide what to do with some of this land, if not all of it, because I think it really should be your choice. And I think they went too far back in the 30s when they built some of this of taking land that maybe we ought to give some back. There are counties like McCreary and Whitley where it's like 90% of the land is the park. They have no taxes, and they struggle with their government to get enough taxes. The federal government gives them some payment in lieu of taxes, but it isn't really replacing their needs. Sometimes they're just wanting access, like open a road that we can take into the park to go hunting or go kayaking. They're wanting to use the outdoors, and sometimes the federal government's resistant to their wants. And so I would make a lot of those, I'd have a council of local people, like I'd have the magistrates or something decide access to it. They couldn't take the land back or whatever, but they could have access to it. You get more sports and things into our parks. Because I think they're not of value if we're secluded from using our parks, So I think we could figure it out, but I'd like to have some of these decisions made more locally. I think one more. I've been told no more. Sorry. All right, thank you.
One more time, let's give Senator Paul a big round of applause. Thank you so much for being here today. I know that we've got a photo backdrop over here. If anybody would possibly like to take a picture with the senator. And with that, I want to once again thank all of our sponsors who graciously donated to make this luncheon possible today. And we are going to stand adjourned. Thank you all very much.